Code Veronica. The one Resident Evil game that Capcom seems to be completely forgetting. Like, I don't understand what it is about this game that makes them just not want to show any love and support for it. But this is the one Resident Evil game that everybody in the fan base agrees that should get a remake, and it's not happening. For whatever reason, we don't know. But I'm here to talk about Code Veronica and my thoughts and feelings on this, because this game, I have a kind of weird love-hate relationship with it. What's going on, guys? Welcome back. And Code Veronica. Oh, Code Veronica. Yeah, let's talk about this in my retrospective.
Resident Evil Retrospective.
So many people tend to think that Code Veronica was intended to be the original Resident Evil 3, or was meant to be Resident Evil 3. That's not the case. The game itself, while it feels like it should be a mainline entry, was actually always intended to be a side game. It was never intended to be Resident Evil 3. So let's just go ahead and put that in there, because I'm tired of people saying that Code Veronica is the real Resident Evil 3, when that was never intended to be the case. And just like that, Resident Evil 3 wasn't intended to be Resident Evil 3. That we already discussed in the prior video. Now, we're not going to go and talk about the developmental history or nothing like that. Again, I've said this in my other retrospectives, because so many other videos do that. You can go watch other content creators such as my buddy Jared, Avalanche Reviews, or you can go watch Susie, Sphere Hunter. They both go into the history of Code Veronica. And yeah, I want to just talk about how this game makes me feel as a Resident Evil fan, and just as a video game in general. Code Veronica to me is like the black sheep of the franchise. And I say this full well knowing that RE6 exists. Okay, the reason why I say this is because Code Veronica, while being a side game, feels like a mainline entry. It never, to me, it should never have been a side game, just like everybody else says that it shouldn't be a side game. But for me, this should be Resident Evil 4, and Resident Evil 4 should be Resident Evil 5, and so on and so forth. So by now, we'd be at Resident Evil 9. So this game, how does this fit into the general sphere of Resident Evil? I mean, it's Claire, yeah, but this also starts this weird trope with Claire of needing to constantly be rescued by somebody else, which I don't like. Because Claire, I mean, look, Claire went through Raccoon City just like Leon did, just like Jill. And Claire can hold her own. I mean, that was established in RE2, that Claire can hold her own. So why is it here that in Code Veronica, she has to be rescued by Chris? The whole thing was that Claire is looking for her brother Chris, but then they turn it around and make it so Chris is the one to save her, kill the final boss, fight Wesker, save the day, all that BS. Like, this game is weird. It's a weird game. It's a weird game. It is. The voice acting is horrendous, aside from Allison Court. Like, I cannot stand Scuba Steve's voice acting. Sorry. No offense to Canadians or anything like that. It's just Steve is kind of a weird, whiny little bitch. He is. He's a whiny little bitch. I don't like Steve. Scuba Steve, I'm glad we never got you in another game. And then there's Alfred. I don't even know what to say about Alfred's voice. Like, who decided to make his voice seem the way it does? I understand you want to go for kind of like a psychopath kind of tone, like maybe Joker-esque, like with the whole split personalities thing. By the way, there will be spoilers in this. This is your only real spoiler warning, because I'm just going to ramble on while I discuss this game. So I get you want to make Alfred seem crazy, right? Like, I get that. But that voice doesn't come off crazy as it does just annoying in a less than comical fashion. That laugh, oh my god. That laugh is like the stuff of nightmares, but not even like the good nightmares where like you hear Joker's laugh and you're like, oh my god, that's the Joker. This one, you're like, what the fuck is that? I can't even duplicate that laugh. I really, as much as I would like to try to, I can't. It's just weird. It's weird. It's very weird. The game is weird. Did I say the game was weird? I think I said the game is weird. The story itself is, I mean, I guess kind of straightforward. Like, you have the Ashford family that is behind some stuff in Umbrella. I can understand where they tried to like expand on the lore, right? I get that. You know, like Resident Evil was trying to expand on the lore for quite some time after Resident Evil 3. With Code Veronica, with Resident Evil Survivor, Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil Remake. Like, all these games tried to expand the lore for Resident Evil. And I can appreciate that, but it's just, Code Veronica is just, it's weird. I don't particularly dislike Code Veronica, but I don't like it either. It's a game that I'll play. Like, I'll play it in my Resident Evil marathons that I have every year during October for Halloween time, or I'll play it in my marathons if a new Resident Evil game is releasing, right? Like, I'll play it then, but other than that, I won't really choose to play Code Veronica. Like, I don't reach for the game thinking like, oh, I want to play a Resident Evil game, I'm gonna play Code Veronica. The game itself, it has a lot of problems, and the thing is, like, I hear a lot of people saying that Code Veronica is their favorite Resident Evil game, and I'm sitting here like, why? Well, I don't get it. Why is this one your favorite? The story isn't the greatest. The voice acting is bad. The game has massive pacing issues, which we're going to talk about. The only real good things to come out of Code Veronica, honestly, is the voice actress for Claire and the portrayal of Wesker, because this was the first time that we got the cool, suave kind of Wesker that we all know and love in every other Resident Evil game. Like, in Resident Evil Remake, they basically based that version of Wesker off of Code Veronica Wesker. So that was a good thing, but outside of that, this game has a lot of problems, which is one of the reasons why the fan base, myself included, want a remake of this game to fix all those problems. Like, this game is, I think, the longest Resident Evil game of the old style. And I say the old style, so like tank controls, fixed camera angles, even though Code Veronica doesn't really have fixed camera angles. Like, it's a camera that follows your character, but the camera's kind of fixed. I don't know how to really describe it other than that, but I guess you're watching gameplay footage on the screen, so you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. The game itself, when it comes to like traversing the area, is very different from other Resident Evil games. Like, while the other Resident Evil games are very Metroidvania style, and this one is as well, in the sense that, like, you know, you have your central hub and then you unlock new paths. It's very that Metroidvania style game, but this one just has a lot of unnecessary backtracking, like big time. Where every other Resident Evil game, you can make a path. So if you were to like take the map and you draw out a path of how you're going to play the game, you can draw out a pretty decently linear path in Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, and Resident Evil 3, while still backtracking to certain rooms or certain areas, but never needing to go back to the very beginning, because the design of these maps loops you around. So if you look at the Spencer estate, the Spencer mansion, the design of the map loops you through the main area, the main hallway. Okay, the way that level is designed, it's designed in a way that you never have to truly backtrack through the area, because you'll eventually get back there. Like all the doors lead to that main section. Same thing with RE2. RE2 with the RPD, all the doors lead to the main hallway. RE3 does it different, where RE3, while you can fully explore the city of Raccoon City, it does it in a way that it's still a linear path that you can take, and eventually you'll have to backtrack, but never do you necessarily need to backtrack to the beginning areas. Where in Code Veronica, they make you go all the way back numerous times because the map itself is not a fluid kind of map that allows you to traverse in that kind of circular motion where all the doors lead to one area. Instead, Code Veronica is broken up into little micro sections, and those micro sections don't really have even that kind of looping path. Instead, you go from one micro section to another, and then once you reach that like third or fourth micro section, you got to go back to that first one. And that's where the pacing starts to get really jumbled up, and why this game feels a lot longer and tedious, much more tedious than other Resident Evil games, and why I have such an issue with this game. Every Resident Evil game before this, Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, besides having that centralized section that all the doors lead to, or all the paths lead to, once you leave that section, and I'm talking about like in Resident Evil 1, the first section being the Spencer Mansion, Resident Evil 2, the RPD, and Resident Evil 3, Raccoon City. Once you leave those sections, the game becomes linear. You get to a new section. So in RE1, the new section is the guardhouse before you go back to the mansion. But you have the guardhouse. You traverse through the guardhouse in a very linear fashion. You check the rooms, and you're good to go. And then eventually the Umbrella Labs, again, linear fashion. You go through the Umbrella Labs, and you do everything you need to do. In RE2, you go from the RPD, and then you go to the sewers, which the sewers are then a very linear style area. And then after that, you have Nest, which is the Umbrella Labs version 2, which again is a kind of linear section. You have a middle section to it that you pass through, but it's still a linear style section with less exploration than the RPD had. RE3 has Raccoon City, and then when you leave Raccoon City, you have 3 different sections instead of just 2. Here you have the park. Then after the park, you have the clock tower, and then you have, or well, I think I'm doing this backwards. You have the clock tower, then you have the park, and then you have the dead factory. So all of these sections become very linear at that point because you've already passed through the main section of the game. Usually by about a little bit more than halfway through, once you get to maybe 2/3, the game becomes linear. Code Veronica doesn't necessarily do this. It goes from one section that has the whole microsections, like I mentioned, with a lot of backtracking to areas that you shouldn't need to go to then another section in Antarctica that, first off, there's no way that Claire can be running through that without a jacket or something, or like heavy snow gear, whatever. You know what? That's a different rant. That's she should have had frostbite and hypothermia. She should have been dead by that alone. But anyways, you go into Antarctica, and that becomes like yet another section to explore, similar to how like the Spencer Mansion would be. So Code Veronica is kind of backwards. But the biggest problem is once you get to Chris's section, because then you need to do all of that again now with Chris. And again, it's very tedious. It's in a lesser fashion. Yes, like the whole prison compound, you don't need to explore it in full detail with Chris, but the fact that you need to revisit a lot of these areas for like the 5th time, it causes you to feel a little bored. Like, oh my God, why am I back here? I left. Why am I back? So, yeah, like this game is tedious to the umpteenth degree. This game also kind of continues that trope of Claire not using certain weapons like a shotgun. Why can Claire not use a shotgun? I just, why? I love the shotgun in Resident Evil games. That is like my go-to weapon. If Jill can use a shotgun, so can Claire. I don't understand this. This has bothered me for the longest time because Claire doesn't use a shotgun again at all until Revelations 2. Why? Why is this a thing? You give her a crossbow, which is atrocious. Crossbows suck in Resident Evil 2 and in Code Veronica. But they do upgrade the crossbow in Code Veronica, which we'll get to in a second. And you give her the grenade launcher, which in Code Veronica, the grenade launcher acts like the shotgun because it's a spread shot. That the spread shot sucks. Like, it's a close range grenade launcher. Why? Why is this a close range grenade launcher? I don't understand the decision making behind some of these things. If you have a grenade launcher, there's no reason for it to be close range. And it arcs in a weird way. It's a spread shot grenade launcher. So you shoot it, and in a similar way to a shotgun going to spread blast, this one goes in a spread of mini grenades into like a downward motion to like right in front of you. So if a zombie is like across the screen or like an enemy's across the screen, you have to wait till they get closer for you to actually use this. And then the other thing is, if you aim it up to try to give it like a little bit more trajectory for its downward motion, they explode mid-air, so it doesn't work. So you can't get extra distance because the grenades explode mid-air. Can you see my problem with this weapon? With this design? It's not good. Now, the crossbow is broken. It's broken in this game because they have explosive arrows. These explosive arrows take out the final boss in 10 shots. 10 shots, you're done. And that's busted. That's busted as hell because these 10 shots it's the fastest shooting gun outside of the submachine guns. It is the fastest shooting gun in this game. And it's broken. If you save up your explosive arrows until like the later part of the game when you're playing as Chris Redfield, you will blow through everything in that game. Like in the rest of the game, because it is that broken. As long as you save 10 rounds for the final boss, it's insane what they did with that. And I'll give them props for that. But at the same time, stop giving Claire a crossbow. Seriously, though, stop. I would like to see Claire with like a magnum or something like that. Again, she gets that in Revelations 2. But it shouldn't have taken till Revelations 2 for her to like get whatever weapon she wanted. You know, like it's a weird gripe. It is. I'm sorry. But I don't get it. I don't get it. The music's good, though. I like the music in Code Veronica. Music's probably top tier for damn sure. Really is. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. The music's good. Music's good. Now, for me, Code Veronica, I didn't get Code Veronica, or I didn't buy Code Veronica right away. I didn't have a Dreamcast. The game released on Dreamcast originally. I didn't have a Dreamcast. I had a PS2 and a GameCube. And so eventually I got Code Veronica on PlayStation 2. But my first encounters with Code Veronica was at my friend's house. He bought Code Veronica, and this was the same friend who actually like allowed me to play Resident Evil Director's Cut for the first time because he bought it. I didn't have it. I didn't get it until later, but so he was talking about this new Resident Evil game that he wanted me to see, that it was really scary and like he thought I would like it. So I admit, when I first played Code Veronica at my friend's house, it was terrifying. Like that moment where the zombie gets dragged underneath the house by the Cerberus dogs and not seeing the Cerberus dogs, that's terrifying for a first time playthrough because you don't know what's under there. You're like, holy crap, what just pulled that body in? Was it a licker? Was it a hunter? Was it like so many things go through your mind because it's a new game. So you don't know what kind of enemies are in the game yet. And up until that point, all you've seen were zombies. So you first encounter this, and it's a good introduction to the Cerberus dogs. But, I mean, the Cerberus dogs don't really do anything because you can avoid them very easily. That's a problem with Resident Evil games just in general with the Cerberus dogs. They're very easy to dodge. So, yeah, it's an unfortunate thing with the dogs. But anyways, it was definitely terrifying to see that. But that horror aspect of things in this game goes away very quickly once you encounter Alfred. It's it's that bad. He as a character, he is that bad because it takes away any fear that you might have in this game up until that point. Just encountering this clown. I don't know what else to call him other than a clown. Encountering this clown for the first time and hearing that laugh, just it's just bad. It is just bad. So you see why I have an issue with this game, because there's a lot of things not to like about this game. There's a lot of things to like about it, such as being the first of the Resident Evil series to use 3D renders for everything, including the backgrounds. Gone are the pre-rendered backgrounds. It's the first Resident Evil game to have kind of a camera that follows you while still being kind of fixed. It still has tank controls. It still has inventory management. It has everything that you would like in a Resident Evil game if you were a fan of the older style. But everything else that's in this package is just not good. That's why for me this game is just kind of there. It's not good, but it's not bad. It's just there. And I personally can't find reasons to make myself love this game. And I don't have to love this game, right? Just like you don't have to love my favorite Resident Evil game, which is Resident Evil 3. The original one, not the remake. So, yeah, I mean, we're allowed to like whatever we like and dislike whatever we want to dislike. And Code Veronica, I just can't fall in love with this one. I really can't. Personally, I like Resident Evil Survivor over Code Veronica. And we'll talk about that when I get to Resident Evil Survivor. But Code Veronica takes a lot of the stuff that Resident Evil 3 had and doesn't do some of the quality of life improvements that Resident Evil 3 did. And I understand that that's a product because of the fact that it's two different developmental teams. I understand that 100%. But when you go and play Resident Evil 3 and you can run upstairs without having to push an action button, and then you play Code Veronica and you try to run upstairs and it doesn't let you run upstairs until you press the X button, yeah, that's going to get to you. That is going to get to you because you got so used to just running upstairs. They did implement the quick turn that was in Resident Evil 3, so that was cool. But then they took away the randomization factor that's in Resident Evil 3. So Code Veronica's replay value just dropped tremendously. You don't have different endings from different characters like you do in RE2, RE1. You don't have the different style of playthroughs like you do in RE3. It's the same game no matter what way you play it. So Code Veronica doesn't really have the replay value, in my opinion, that the other games do. Now, you might be like, well, you're wrong because I play this game all the time. And that's why I said you can like whatever you want to like. I'm just saying it as it is. The game doesn't have the replay value at all. RE1 has more replay value than this game does. And then, of course, there's RE Director's Cut, which has even more replay value because you have the arrange mode. RE2, same thing. You have the arrange mode. You have the different playthroughs. You have side A, side B. So you got 2 playthroughs with Leon, 2 playthroughs with Claire, and then you have the arrange mode that you can do with both of those characters. So you have a total of 8 different playthroughs in Resident Evil 2. In Resident Evil 3, same thing. You have 8 different playthroughs for the different epilogues. And on top of that, every playthrough is going to give you a different experience because you're going to run into different enemies at different places, different items in different places. Nemesis will pop up in different places. The puzzles will be different. So there will always be something different in your playthrough with Resident Evil 3. Code Veronica is always the same. So to me, replay value is always one of the biggest factors when I'm playing a game. And one of the reasons why it keeps me coming back to this game. Not keeps me coming. That's pause. So I hold a lot of weight and a lot of value in replayability. And that is for good reason. Whenever you buy a game, doesn't matter if you're buying a game that's an old game, that's a new game, that's a cheaper game, that's an expensive game. You want to get the most bang for your buck. You want to get your money's worth. Code Veronica never felt like I was getting my money's worth out of this game. And even when I bought the game myself on my PS2 and I played it and beat it, I was like, it was just okay. I didn't have the same experience that I had with RE3 or RE2 or RE1. Like, it just didn't give me that same satisfaction that, like, oh, I want to play this again. I just beat it. I want to play it again. Code Veronica never did that for me. And for a good while, Code Veronica also is the reason why I didn't like Claire as a character for the longest time. Not really so much because her character is bad in Code Veronica, but because I didn't like the game, and she's the face of the game. So being the face of the game just associated Claire to me as not being an enjoyable character for me. It wasn't until Revelations 2 where I fell in love with Claire again as a character. So it's kind of like Code Veronica has a weird stigma for me that I can't seem to get over and get around. But again, if you guys enjoy this game, that is awesome. I'm glad that you enjoy it. I'm glad it's your favorite Resident Evil game. Again, it's not a bad game. It's not a bad Resident Evil game. It's just not, it's not good either. It's in that middle area where it's tolerable. You know, it's like that sibling that annoys the crap out of you, and you're like, well, you know, I have to like you because you're my brother or sister. You know, like, that's almost how I feel with Code Veronica. It's like, I have to kind of like you a little bit because you're Resident Evil. You're still at the core the Resident Evil that I enjoy playing, which is the survival horror, but I don't really like you. I just kind of have to. You're just there. You're there. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Sound on in the comment section if you enjoy Code Veronica. Or if you don't, let me know how you feel about the game. That's why I'm doing these. And if you enjoyed this, hit the thumbs up. And I'll see you guys in the next Resident Evil Retrospective. Not sure if we're doing Survival or RE4 next. We're going to figure it out. Catch you next time.